Chapter 1. Today is the day the garage finally stood up. In this episode, we bring a crane along the same tight, muddy farm track we used for the containers. We set all the 3 containers onto the fat puddings, we ratchet them together, millimetre-perfect, weld them into a single structure, solve the roof drainage problem, and then start building the floor, the gym, and the workshop inside. We were only 2 people on that day, plus the crane driver, but with a bit of improvisation and 2 ratchet straps, we got it done. And before we jump into the chaos of crane day, let me give you 5 tips that will make your own container setting day a lot less stressful. Chapter 2, and these 5 tips. Tip 1. Plan crane day around weight and reach and not around the calendar. The heaviest container with the biggest reach comes first. The further the crane has to reach, the less you can lift. That's just the basic physics, so plan the sequence accordingly. Tip 2. Don't expect the crane to place the containers perfectly tight and aligned. We always use ratchet straps to pull the containers together, also diagonally, until the gaps are where we want them. Only then we start welding. Tip 3. Before you set the container down onto the footings, double check your conduits and service routes. If fresh water, sewer or technical conduits have to come up through the floor in certain spots, you need to think about that while you're lowering the container, not afterwards. Tip 4. As soon as the container are in position, we weld them together at the corner castings, top and bottom. From that moment on, they behave as one big container instead of 3 separate units. Tip 5. Think about drip edges and rain protection before you decide you're done with the steel work. If you realize after painting that you forgot a drip edge above a roll-up door, you'll drag out the welder, grind the primer and paint it again, and you'll do the same job twice. Chapter 3. The crane day finally came. Unfortunately, there were only 2 people of us on site that day, plus the crane driver, because we had other projects running at the same time. The crane had to come along the same narrow, muddy farm track we used for the containers. So it was tight, slippery, and of course the 2 90-degree bends. Out on the field, we had to position the crane so that it wouldn't sink into the ground, could reach all 3 containers with the boom, and would not have to be moved every 5 minutes. Chapter 4. The biggest challenge was finding a position where the crane could stood safely and had enough reach to pick up the first container, and could still serve all 3 pad locations without being repositioned. That wasn't a giant crane, the maximum reach was limited, and the first container was the heaviest and the one that needed the largest reach. Chapter 5. The first container was the most critical. It needs the biggest reach, it was the heaviest, and it had to land exactly over the area with the most of the services, the conduits for water, sewer and technical room. At full reach, the crane was about a meter too short where we would have liked to be. In other words, we couldn't just hover straight above the footings, so we had to improvise. We let the container swing slightly and lowered it at just the right moment. At the same time, we had to make sure the conduits for fresh water and sewer came up in the right spots for the future toilet and technical area. That was a bit of a nerve-wracking moment, but it worked first time. After about 1.5 hours, the first container was in place, sitting on the pad footings with all the conduits exactly where they need to be and nothing damaged. Chapter 6. The reason why the first container was so heavy was because the wall side was fully clad, the roof already sheeted over, and the drywall inside, including the bathroom area. At that stage, we had no plumbing or tiles yet, and a lot of steel and board. The second container was the lightest of the 3. It was just the roof, the floor frame, and the end walls were there, but both side walls were completely removed. The third container had the roll-up doors installed, so it was heavy again, but by the time we set that one, the crane was already about 5 meters closer to the final position, so reach was no problem anymore. Chapter 7. With the second container, we really felt the difference. No sidewalls, the weight was less, shorter reach, and that one was pretty relaxed compared to number 1. The third container was with the roll-up doors. It was a bit heavy again, but then the crane stood much closer to the final position, so it was no big deal. Step by step, all 3 containers ended up roughly on their pad footings in the correct order, but not yet perfectly pulled together. Chapter 8. Once the crane had done its job, it was time for fine-tuning. Thanks to good groundwork and footings, we didn't have huge corrections to make, but the last few millimeters are always manual work. We used ratchet straps. One to pull the containers sideways together and another one diagonally to square the whole block up. We kept tightening until the gaps looked completely right, the fronts lined up perfectly, and the roof lines ran cleanly in one line. Then we welded the containers together at the corner castings, first at the top and then to the bottom. From that moment on, the 3 containers stopped behaving like 3 individual boxes. They started acting like one single building. Chapter 9. To connect roofs properly, we added some temporary bracing inside and did some final tweaks. Small height differences were corrected and the roof edges were brought into one clean line. Then we welded the containers together along the roof area, mainly along the longitudinal beams and the joints where the containers meet. With all that, the shell was aligned in plan, level in height, and structurally tied together across the top as well. Chapter 10. There was one more roof topic that's easy to overlook. A single container has a slightly chroned roof. Water usually runs off the long sides. But if you have 3 containers side by side, you now have one big shared roof surface. In the middle, water can no longer just run straight off the side. It will end to sit there. So we did 2 things. We built a slight fall along the length of the garage, so water naturally runs out to one direction. On the sill side of the roof, we created a kind of gutter by shaping and welding the roof joints between the containers so that the water is guided along the line and then off over the short side. The welded joints between the roof longitudinal beams effectively form small channels. Water can follow those channels and drain off in a controlled way. The idea was to later add a proper gutter to collect the water. I never got around to fitting the gutter in the end, but the roof was already prepared for it structurally. Chapter 11. The middle container with no sidewalls had another special behavior. The floor frame had stored tension and the floor had a noticeable spring to it. I wanted the floor to sit solidly on the footings and without any bounce. We knew exactly where each pad footing was, so we cut the floor longitudinal beams at those points. Then we did the following. We welded a solid steel crossbar from the left floor beam to the right floor beam, basically a heavy bolt steel about 10 millimeters thick, drilled 2 holes through that bar and then set as an anchor through it and straight into the concrete pad below. This pulled the container down onto the footing and took the tension out of the floor frame. The springiness disappeared and the floor now sat properly on the pads. Afterwards, we welded the cut pieces of the floor beams back in, so we had a closed continuous floor structure again, just now firmly anchored and no longer under tension. Chapter 12. Of course, even after the crane day, the project had one more lesson for us. After everything was in place, we had another period of heavy rain. That's when we noticed the roll-up doors weren't as watertight as we hoped. The issue wasn't the way we installed them, it was the transition at the top between the door curtain and the guide tracks. There was a tiny gap there, and when the wind drove the rain straight onto the front of the building, water found its way in right at that point. Yeah, the fix was simple but involved more work. We added a drip edge above the roll-up doors a flat steel profile weld on, so we had to weld, clean up, prime, repaint and regreen. We really should have done that earlier during the main steel phase, but it slipped through. The learning here: before you put the welder away for good, walk around the building and ask yourself, do I have drip edges where I might get water? Is everything shaped so that water goes where I want, not where it wants? Otherwise you end up going through this whole cycle again: grind, weld, prime, paint, and that's a lot of extra work for a small detail. Chapter 13. After all that, we could finally move on into making the inside usable. On top of the timber floor we laid a heavy-duty water-resistant industrial click tile, tough and very easy to clean. And on top of that we added a 35mm rubber gym floor. It was measured in 1x1 meter tiles, cut into fit the space and fully covering the training area. Then we started to move the gym in. So equipment like dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, plates, a small rack and a shelf where all the everyday stuff can live: cases, gear, small items. One other section became a small workshop area with a workbench, shelves, tools, and basically everything you need and want close at hand in the garage. Chapter 14. Standing in this space at that point, it's hard to imagine that there used to be a rotten old double carport there, and that this building is really just 3 old shipping containers joined together. We had cut the containers down, reinforced, insulated them, we opened them up, we painted them, craned them onto fat puddings, welded them together, solved the roof drainage, built the floor, moved in a gym, and set up a small workshop. In the next episode, it's less about the heavy lifting and more about the details, like lighting, electrics, and how it feels to actually train and work in a container garage. But that's a story for another day. I'm Andy and I know containers. See you in the next one.